Okay, so this is, I suppose, part 2 of the Tekin Mid-Motor RC10 conversion. As you can see, I'm basically, I would say 95% done with the build here. The only thing that's left is to get wheels and tires and mount those, mount some electronics, put a body and wing on there, and then this is all set. But the main part of the chassis is done. So let me start with the rear real quickly. So I think since the last video, I installed MIP CVDs. These are the sort of older style CVDs that have, I don't know the size of this axle, but the modern B4 axle is a 3/16 inch axle. This is larger than that, so it uses a different type of rim, the older RC10 rims. So I just got to find a set of those and mount those. And let's see, the inner hinge pin here for the suspension arms, I had originally thought that the manual for the build was wrong because it said that you can use the original RC10 inner hinge pins from your normal chassis when you convert the chassis to mid-motor. Now the reason why I thought that was wrong was because when I went out and bought actually several different sets of inner rear hinge pins, they were a little over 2 inches long, like 2.03 inches long, and they didn't quite go all the way through the Tekin arm, which is a little bit longer than the original RC10 arm. But it turns out that the original RC10 hinge pins were actually longer than this. The re-released models use a slightly shorter hinge pin, as far as I understand from RPM's website. So RPM went back and at least it says on their site, they contacted the original supplier of those hinge pins, and they sell now the longer inner rear hinge pins. So that's part number 70590. Okay, so you can pick up a pair of those, and that's what I did and installed them, and now these hinge pins are the perfect length to fit these Tekin arms on this chassis. So that all fits fine. Shocks are mounted. I used front and rear the RPM Delrin pivot balls here. I was originally a little hesitant to do plastic on plastic because the shock end piece is plastic as well, but it does actually go rather smoothly. So I'm pretty happy with that. Neon yellow RPM accent parts, so such as the ball cups, the spring cups, and the spring retainer clips, all around front and rear. I do like RPM's neon yellow. It's a shame that they don't make any more the neon yellow spring clips. I really like these. Let's see, so the rear is all set. Just got to put a motor in and a pinion. Maybe I'll get a gear cover. I don't really see a need to do that if this is a shelf queen. So fits fine. One thing to note, when you put this active link suspension together, and it says, I commented in the first video about this, that you gotta, for all the different screws that you use for each of the links in this part of the suspension, you have to make it just not tight enough that it binds up. You'll find that even if you shave the parts down a little bit, and you put it all together, it'll feel like maybe there's a little bit of bind, but once the shocks are on there, it actually works okay. It's really not too bad. So let's see, the rear shock tower, even though if you just look at the shock tower on its own, it appears to be a little flimsy, it mounts onto the chassis in a way that basically prevents it from breaking. So you have 4 screws, 2 on the bottom here, 2 on the bottom over here, that mount it to the chassis. And you mount the screw in from this side, and you just put a lock nut in on the other side. And then there's another 2 screws here at the top center that mount it to the motor plate, or this, it's not a motor plate, it's transmission brace. So the older transmission brace for the RC10, let me just pull that out. It's this guy here, okay? So this is too short to use on the Tekin mid-motor chassis. They give you this part here for the mid-motor chassis build. So you have to use this, and it has this little molding on the end here for these 2 screws to go into. So all this really means is that, okay, you know, shock tower is nice and rigid now. If you have to get to the to rebuild the diff, though, you have to take this part off as well as the 4 screws at the bottom and the hold the gearbox on. So it's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 screws total to get the gearbox out and to take it apart. On the original Team Car and World's Car, it was just these 4 screws at the bottom and then the 4 screws that held the little brace on at the top. So it's really only 2 extra screws to take the gearbox out. Okay, moving to the front. Everything you see on the front here is new except for the steering knuckles, the shocks, and the shock tower. Everything else is brand new. So these here are the J-Concepts front nose brace tubes. A&L steering rack, new in package. I decided to use this instead of the stock steering rack, although I do notice a problem when you use this rack with the RPM ball cups. The way the inner hinge pin is positioned, it pushes the inner hinge pin out a bit, and that sets you up in such a way that there's a little bit of bind between the inner ball cup for the camber link and the inner ball cup for the steering link for some part of the steering arc. Not the entire arc, but for some of it. So that could be a problem if you plan on actually running it like this. Again, this is a shelf queen. I'm not running it, so I'm not too concerned. If you did want to run it, you would just want to use the smaller original associated ball cups in here, like the old white ones, for example. They just re-released those, so they're not hard to find. And those are thin enough so that they shouldn't bind here on the inside. Let's see. What else we got here? Brand new front arms. Brand new caster blocks. These are, I believe, 15-degree caster blocks. You can get 30 degrees. I think the re-released World's Car comes with white 30-degree caster blocks. These are for the original RC10, so they're 15-degree. You can also look around on eBay and find the 30-degree caster blocks for the RC10T or GT. Those are black in color. So, yeah, using those. If I were to run this, I would switch these to 30-degree caster blocks. 15 degrees would be probably not very stable along driving in a straight line. But it'll give you a lot of turn-in. But mid-motor on its own has plenty of cornering, so you don't really need low caster angle here. Let's see. That's pretty much it. It's a pretty simple build. When everything's put together, of course, without the electronics, this feels very light. This molded chassis here is much lighter than the original aluminum chassis for the RC10. So this feels actually about as light as a B4. So that's pretty cool. And let's see, I can't really think of much else to point out here other than the binding. That was a notable issue. The rear inner hinge pins was a notable issue. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Everything else went together pretty smoothly because everything else was basically original RC10 parts. Yeah, so I hope you like it. In time, I'll have a body painted and a wing mounted and everything. But in the meantime, this is the status of the build, basically done, and I'm pretty happy with it. So thanks for watching.